been to Dr. Bucknell's clinic, and I've seen children there just like I've seen big people. So they're going to get just as much out of it. Also, as Pastor Pamela said, can we move forward? Ma'am, can you raise your hand right here? Can you come forward more right here? Let her be there. And you don't have to hold it up all night, but
But then that'll put me on the back row.
that's part of Dr. Bucknell's teaching. How long can you hold on one hand? I'm really kind of excited, not a little 8-year-old girl excited, but I'm excited about the teaching tonight because it has changed my life, being a part of Dr. Bucknell. I sleep better. I'm just everything about me is just totally changed. And so I'm excited about what you're going to learn tonight. And so I know there are others that are coming, but I'm glad those that are here already right now. So Dr. Michael Bucknell is the speaker and the doctor, and our leader tonight is Liberation Chiropractic. It's right down the street, just before you get to Tanner Williams. You guys pass by it all the time if you come from the Schillingers area. So also right next door is the Red Bar, where we have third Sunday morning, the adult, what do we have, marriage ministry and fellowship. Pastor Marvin and I teach marriage here at the Red Bar, 9 a.m. to 10:15. We also have, here at the church, we have nursery is open, and we've had a really, really good time. Plus the coffee is awesome. The coffee and the sandwiches are really good. So that's third Sunday, 9 to 10:15. Every third Sunday morning for marrieds. And we even open it up to the premarital couples. And also, if one of the couples are working or whatever, you don't miss it because your spouse are not available. Just come anyway and take notes. So it's just really good for the marrieds that we've had down there at the Red Bar. We thank God for it. So, Dr. Mike Bucknell, are you ready, sir? I want to come and introduce you to our speaker for tonight, Dr. Mike Bucknell, of Liberation Chiropractor. Let's give it.
You guys can hear me okay? Yes. All right, well, I'm 8-year-old girl excited about this. Every time I get to teach this stuff, I love it. This is really the essence of what we do. It's not the actual like physical part of it. It's that's the exercise component. That's just what we do. But it's a teaching, it's a principle, it's getting the big idea that really makes the ultimate difference in people's lives. Like, you can go to church, but if you don't get anything out of it that actually changes the way that you live, then is there much point going to church, right? So this tonight is going to give you the big idea of how you were built to work. And this is a topic that unfortunately most people do not get anywhere near enough information on. I mean, we've never, most likely throughout our walk, in life or, spiritual, that we've ever looked to the Bible as a health guide on how our body is built. Instead, we go by a different authority, right? We go by the different authority called science. And guys, I'm going to be the first one to tell you, science was designed by who? Was designed by God. So it should line up. And if it doesn't line up, then there's something wrong with the science because there's not anything wrong with God. Right? So I'm going to show you guys tonight how your body was really built. We're going to go through a couple of different topics. We're going to cover, number 1, how you were made. Number 2, we're going to go through the Bible's eating plan, which may not line up with your plan, right? So this isn't necessarily going to be a comfortable topic. But it's a highly debated topic, and all the answers are there when we look at them, and it's not what we've been taught. Number 3 is understanding disease from the biblical standpoint. What does the Bible actually say about disease? And this is This is unfortunately the condensed version because we only have, say an hour, hour and a half, versus probably the 5 or 6 hours that it would really take to go through this stuff bit by bit and chew this stuff up from a very scientific, very deep philosophical standpoint. So I'm going to be going through it rather quickly. One thing that I do want to mention right off the bat, if you guys, everybody in here has a bag, did you guys all get a bag? Raise your hand if you did not get a bag, and we will get a bag in your hands. Okay, there's some stuff in that bag, but one thing in there is it's called a stress survey or a health survey. Okay, everybody take that out right now, out of your bag. You're going to want to do this. And go ahead and fill that out. But the important thing on there, really the important thing is make sure that your email address is on there and legible. Okay? Because we're going to take it and we're going to sell it to the NSA. We wouldn't do that. What we're going to do is we're going to send everybody that leaves that health survey filled out with their email address on there, I'm going to send you the PowerPoint slides. Okay? That way you guys can go back and you can reference, and I invite you to chew up everything that we talked about tonight. Because if you find it to be untrue, should you accept it? Absolutely not, right? So this is a safe house to be thinking about what is there and to chew it up and to think about it and really digest this stuff and fish it out. If it's no good, you'll know pretty quickly. So we're going to send you guys all those slides. So you can go ahead on to the next. While you guys are filling that out, go ahead and do that right away just so we don't forget. I'm going to go ahead and start with the opening notes. So first thing, Scripture must be taken in its original context. It must be taken in the original context. The reason why, we can't assume we know exactly what they were thinking. How come? Because they would be really old right now, right? So this was a long time ago. We can't assume that we know everything about the way that they were thinking. So that means we have to take everything in context. We can't just take one little sentence and then try to fit it in with how it applies to us today, right? We've got to look at the big picture, read it all in sequence, see if it plugs in, okay? Now, the second thing, we often over-spiritualize and under-apply due to our previous understanding and cultural influence, okay? Deep thought there. What that means is we often take things and we try to, we blow it up spiritually and try to feel our way through it, but what we realize at the end of the day is, are we really applying those things? And we get to the conclusion that we see a lot of people, they spend a lot of time in church and reading and everything else, but is it really changing? Is it really doing something different? Are you altering anything? So if you don't alter anything, if you don't apply it, then it's really just, well, I feel so, I say so, but, it's the action, right? Faith without works is dead, right? So we have to apply this stuff if it's going to make any good for you. Go to the original text. Make sure you're looking at original text. Everybody knows there's, 18,000 different translations of the Bible? The good news is we have good access to really good tools to be able to look at the original text. One I know is that I use often is blueletterbible.org. And you can go and you can look at the original Greek and Hebrew text and click on a word and see exactly what that word means. So some of this stuff you're going to see tonight, if you go in and you cross-reference, you'll be able to take it straight back to that. So go to the original text. Some of this may shake your foundation, but I want to reassert, I didn't write it. Okay? All I'm doing is relaying the message, so, when I get the hate mail for not being able to eat such and such and such, I didn't write it, but who did? Yeah, the guy we're all here for. So, one more question, one more very important question before we go, and this is really the big question for all this. Does God contradict himself? No. What I mean by that is, if we see something written that says do this, does God go back and change his mind later and say don't do this? Specifically, like I'm talking a direct contradiction. Never. It doesn't happen. So if that's the case, if God doesn't change, then that should change the way that we read things. Because how can it say one thing at one point, and then it says a completely different thing at another point? That's a big point to be looking at here, because that thought alone in the back of your mind makes you really look at things different and say, okay, now if it said that back there, then, but my interpretation has been this. Why is my interpretation this? And maybe I should rethink that. Because these two interpretations, Old Testament, New Testament, all that stuff, it should line up. Because it's all one book. It's all written by the same guy, and he doesn't contradict himself. Okay? Go on to the next one. Okay, so the creation of man. This is really important to talk about how you were created first and foremost. This stuff really shakes you up when you start thinking and chewing it. Then the Lord God formed the man of the dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. That's Genesis 2:7. Okay? Now, when you go back to the original Hebrew text, this is literally the verse that shows you how you grow a man. This is how you make a human being. Okay? This is why science can't figure it out. Because, see, you've got the ground, which is Adamah. You see why Adam was named Adam. It comes from Adamah, from the ground. Okay? This literally means piece of ground. It literally means the dirt, right? That we all know we're made of dirt. This is the dirt. Just the innate substance that, it's inanimate. But then something unique happens. God puts his neshama, the breath of life, into that dirt and unifies it. And that is, neshama is the breath of God. This is actually the Spirit of God. This is why science will never be able to create life. Because we cannot create the breath of God. Does that make sense? So we're spending a lot of time and money trying to create life. It's not going to happen. It can happen. If you see it does happen, there's something wrong with it. There's something not, there's some lie to it happening. You know automatically because we can't simulate this. But the interesting part is this. When you take the ground and you take the Spirit of God, the breath of God, and you unify those two things together, it says that is what creates the living being, the nephesh. This is translated the soul, the self, the life. This is the person. Okay? So you have these two necessary components. Anybody in here ever bake a cake? Everybody has, right? So you take the flour, and then you take the water, and you take those two things together, and you mix it together, and then you put it in the oven, and out comes a cake. Can you take the, that's not going to be a very good cake, but that's the short end of it, right? What happens if you try to now take all the water out of the cake? You can't really do it. I mean, it's a unified system that you can't now deconstruct and pull apart. If you do that, you destroy the entire thing. Well, this is basically what Genesis line out, that this is the way that we are built. So God takes the ground, the dirt, the physical substance, and he takes his breath of life and he merges them together and he creates you. He creates the person, the animate object, the soul, the life. So this really brings up some really interesting questions, and this is not something we're going to chew on tonight. This could be I'll defer this one to you, right? This is a whole nother sermon or set of sermons or whatever, but the question is this. So, if that's the case, what happens when we remove some of that? What happens if you remove the body? Do you continue to exist? What happens if you remove the breath of God? Do you continue to exist? Interesting stuff. And see, this is the reason this is so important. You might think this is, some of you I know right now are thinking, oh my goodness, this is blasphemy. Some of you are thinking that because of the way that we've been trained over the course of our lives. And trust me, when you get into this stuff, it makes a whole lot more sense than it does challenge any belief system that you have. Trust me in that. Because here's the cool part. The way that we live our lives tends to be that we don't take care of the ground. Right? we defer everything to the nefesh. We defer everything to saying, God's Spirit is going to take care of me. And we look at this thing, the body, as if it's this just decrepit mass of primordial slime. That science has told us that we evolved from apes and all this other stuff. And we look at this thing and we don't take care of it because we're trapped inside of it, right? But if you go and you look up a word called Platonism, you'll see where all this came from. Okay? Actually, it's probably more in the realm of Neoplatonism now, but you'll see where this came from. And this is a very destructive, basically, addition into biblical understanding because of what it does mainly to our existence right here. See, because of this understanding, we think we put so much effort and understanding into what happens after we escape from this body that we forget what we're doing in this body. Does that make sense? Yes. So when you start to challenge stuff, all of a sudden you come to some really stunning realizations, realities. Here's the biggest one. I'm going to give you the biggest one. What's the only thing that God gave to you and you exclusively? Your body. Do we forget that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit? He removed the old temple. You are the new temple. He resides in you. That should really shake up the way that we deal with ourselves. The way that we think, the way that we act, the things that we do to our body, the way that we respect it, that should really change the way that we view it. But see, we've been trained in a society that looks at it as if our body is a trap and that, we should not be happy with ourselves. That's just dead wrong. Dead wrong. Okay? So really think about this stuff as we're moving forward. Go on to the next one here. Holistic A&P. This is how you were built. This is really cool stuff. This is by far my favorite part as a chiropractor because did you know the Bible talks about chiropractic in a somewhat off way, but our entire philosophy is wrapped up in the way that the Bible describes anatomy. And he put all things under his feet and gave him as head over all things. Go to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. That's Ephesians. You guys have heard that one before, right? Now, here's something I want you to look at. And this is amazing because have you guys ever used an analogy before? All the time, right? Why do you use analogies? To help you understand. So if I'm trying to, I was talking to somebody today about this, and if I'm trying to teach you something about vegetables, am I going to use quantum physics to make an analogy? No, right? Instead, I would ask you, well, what do you do? What do you do? You're a mom? Okay, so would it not make sense for me, understanding my wife and what it means to be a mom, to use an analogy in a parental fashion to get her to understand what I'm trying to construe, right? So, in other words, an analogy is always used because it's a way that you understand a more complex thought. Okay, so it's something in context to make you understand a more complex thought. So, if you were the writer of the Bible, and you were going to use an anatomical reference to make an analogy of how God works within our church, within our community, why in the world would you use an analogy that nobody understands? You wouldn't do it, right? You would use something that everybody understands. So here's what I'm trying to point out to you. Back in the time of the Bible, we understood exactly how the body worked. That's an amazing thought, isn't it? That anatomically we knew that the body, the way that the body works, is that everything happens here, in the head. And the body is there to support the head in its existence. However, if you sever the head from the body, what happens? It ceases to function. You die immediately. Okay? So in other words, they understood this, and so, the writer here said, okay, listen, this is what I'm trying to tell you. If you remove the church from God, the head, if you sever the neck, you will no longer function. You will cease to function as a church. Does that make sense? So it's using a reference on how the body, which means everybody understood. Everybody understood how this works. This is really, really big stuff because you look at how science treats the body today, you don't see this. You don't see this being used in healthcare. When was the last time that that you went to the doctor and they asked you, we're going to check how your brain is communicating with your body? Like, what? Nobody's ever heard that, right? Raise your hand if you've ever heard that, outside of a chiropractic office. Nobody? Yeah, exactly, nobody. Nobody's heard that before. In fact, we don't look at the nerve system at all. So here's a problem, because we understood this, 2,000 years ago, or more than that, right? This was written way further than that. But we don't understand it now. So either we've forgotten or it's been completely removed. One of the two. I'll let you make the call there. So the head, and it goes on, the head from whom the whole body, nourished and knit together through its joints and ligaments, grows. Colossians 2:19. So the whole body is knit together by the joints, the ligaments, keeping everything together so that the head can operate above, down, inside out, and keep that thing working properly. Amazing. Did you know that the first medical document in existence, the oldest document that we have in existence, is called the Edwin Smith Papyrus? Okay? I actually have a link to this on my website. If you go to liberationchiropractor.com, it's the very first one on the research page. And it shows, basically, it's a field manual for Egyptian soldiers. And the big point in the whole thing is they're going through and they're showing you, if you have injuries to this is what you do. If you have injuries to this is what you do. Some of the stuff makes no sense whatsoever. But the fascinating part is, it says, if you see that the neck is severely displaced or the head has an open wound, walk away. Because if it's disconnected, there's no hope for that soldier. They know, if there's spinal cord brain damage, it's done. And this is the oldest medical document we have. So the nervous system controls and coordinates all of the organs and structures of the human body. That's Gray's textbook of anatomy that every doctor in the world looks to for medical information. So it's right there. I mean, it hasn't been forgotten, it's just not in practice. You see the difference? So we know the information is there, but we got to ask, where's it gone? Why aren't we practicing this in everyday healthcare to keep sick people healthy? Or to keep healthy people healthy? It should be everywhere. Go on to the next one. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, through many, are one body, so it is with Christ. There it is again. So he used an anatomical reference on how the body works, above, down, inside out, to represent how Christ works within the church. Wouldn't understand it if you didn't know anatomy. But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. We look at this and we compare this to just a basic nerve chart that you can see in any medical textbook that links all the organs to the nerve system. So you've got the brain, you've got the brain sitting inside of here, and you can follow the spinal cord, and you follow those nerve roots, all these nerve roots coming out of the spine, and they go to each compartment, they go to each organ to keep that functional. And what happens, of course, if you take this and you compress a nerve, you cut off one of those nerves, what happens to that compartment when you remove it from the head? It dies immediately. It shuts down, it ceases to function. So the body is laid out like this, and it just lays it out very simply. But as it is, God arranged these members in the body, each one of them as he chose, connected to the head so that the body can maintain itself and function. It's a beautiful picture. I mean, if you look at it and you think about it, there's no better representation. There's no easier way to understand how God works until you look at the way that he built his most precious creation. His whole system is built into you as a representation. Think about that. That's awesome. That should make you excited about looking in the mirror, not disgusted by looking in the mirror, right? We got to change how we see ourselves. Next one. From whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. I think this is my favorite one of all of them. Because this right here, my friends, this is the chiropractic verse. Right? Read this. The whole body, joined and held together by every joint. So you look at the way that the body is built. Okay? I should lay down the pastor and give him an adjustment right now. So you've got each of the joints, right? And it says right here, when every joint with which it is equipped, with all the ligaments and all the muscles, when everything around that joint is working properly, okay, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. Wait a second. So there's a disconnect. Hang on. It's talking about the joints, but how does that make the body grow? Well, when you see anatomy and you see how it works, it makes perfect sense. This is the subluxation model. Okay? You've got the spine that's working properly. Everything is in its perfect pattern. Everything is where it's supposed to be. And what happens when that is in place? The nerve system, the power of God inside the brain that keeps your body running on a minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis, that can flow through that spinal cord, down through that cord, out through those nerves, to every organ in your body, and maintain you in perfect function. That is the chiropractic verse, right? So subluxation, we look at this in science now. Subluxation and dislocation, like you see in this picture here, are known in the medical research today, have been known for hundreds of years, that they cause impairment through neurological compromise. And you can see it right there. So you look at that picture, and it's so easy to see this, because those joints right there, you guys see that? You see how it's bumping out into that spinal cord? That's because those joints are damaged. Those ligaments are not in place. And so it slips out, it puts pressure on the nerve system, shuts down function of the nerve system. That's just, isn't that just cool? You guys all want to be chiropractors now, right? Okay, go on to the next one. Here's the modern medical approach. The body is a collection of organs, of which some can be removed. Some can even be replaced. Think about that. Tonsils, you don't need those. Hey, guy in the back that's serving people water, we don't need you. Guy attending the parking lot, we don't need you. The guy cutting the grass, we don't need you. Your job isn't important. Really? That's not what the Bible says. The nature of the body is degenerating. Sound familiar? It's degenerating. It's compromised. You're defective. You have genetic problems. Genetic problems? Where'd my genes come from? My dad. Where did his genes come from? His dad. I bet I tracked my daddy's far enough. Who am I going to get back to? Adam. How was he created? So God's defective? That's interesting. Right? The nature of the body is degenerating. Doctors are wise in using drugs and surgery to push back effects of disease and extend breathing. Okay? Now, I want to pause right there. Anybody in here in the healthcare profession? Okay. I'm not blaspheming you. Okay? I love you guys. Really. I mean, a lot of our patients are in the medical profession. It's not the people. It's not the people. It's the protocol. It's what we've been taught. With just what we've covered so far, do you think we could do healthcare better than the way that we're doing it right now? That's the only question, right? So the question is, it's not the people, it's what are we teaching the people? We are the ones that control the system. The system doesn't control us. So we need to change the way that we approach healthcare. You see the difference? And we can, and the only way we're going to do it is doing it together. So we need to push back the effects of disease and extend breathing. Do we save lives in medicine? Absolutely. Absolutely. But at the same time that we say that, we have to acknowledge what the research shows, that in this country, we have the worst healthcare system in the world. I think, well, I take that back. I think it's second to last. The other one's a third world nation. Second to last. So it's this one. It's the dose that makes the poison. It's the dose that makes the poison. Have you ever heard that? You know, your medications are safe, but they're only safe if you take them in the right quantity. Poison is poison, right? You know, let's take this out of context. It's the sin that makes the damage. You know, it's what you do. I mean, well, I don't know. How far did you go? Right? You know, no, it's a sin is a sin, a poison is a poison. Plain and simple. Science is best equipped to cure disease. Who in here has the answer to that one? Who is best equipped to cure disease? God is best equipped to cure disease. Exactly. And where did he put that cure? In each one of us. You have your own cures in you that are working every single day. Who are we? I love what B.J. Palmer said. B.J. Palmer said that, you know, that power shapes the universe. Yet we have more faith in a spoonful of medicine or in a knife than in the power that animates the living world.
Wow.
I mean, that's powerful. I mean, we got to think about this stuff. You get a fever, and you take a Tylenol to get rid of the fever that the body is putting there. See, we've got to rethink everything. We've got to think through everything. What is our body trying to accomplish when we see these things happen? And it's amazing how many symptoms we treat that are actually the body trying to protect itself. The newest revelation is researchers now showing that cancer is the body's attempt to live in a deprived system. Are we surprised by that? I'm not. Because I have absolute faith that the body is going to do the right thing every time. Absolute faith. Absolute. I've never been, in 10 years of practice, I've never been given an opportunity to say the body failed. Not one single time. So we've got to be looking at these principles different. Go ahead to the next one. Not how it always was. This is not how it always was. The way that we see things now in healthcare, this is not the way it always was. Dr. Alexei Speransky worked directly with the famous Dr. Pavlov. Everybody's heard of Pavlov's dogs, right? Okay, probably in textbooks somewhere. You learned about the dog that they rang the bell and it salivated because of, conditioning, neurological conditioning. Well, he worked directly with him. He was himself only an honorary scientist of the USSR. He was regarded worldwide, but strangely now is all but unknown. You can't find his work pretty much anywhere. Just disappeared. In this book over here, Red Miracle, the story of Soviet medicine, it talks in this book about how his works were known worldwide. It goes through a whole section about this doctor. And it says how his works were referenced everywhere, yet you look now, you can't find him. He's been removed from history, literally. There are only a handful of copies of his book, The Theory of the Basis, right here, The Basis for the Theory of Medicine. There's only a handful of those books available in the world today. A couple of them are owned by chiropractic colleges. They happen to get their hands on them. I have a friend that owns one of them that he bought for like $1,000. So you can't find his work, but this stuff was known worldwide back in that time. So his book, The Basis for the Theory of Medicine, published in 1935. That wasn't that long ago, right? That was less than 100 years ago. Show that all disease was a neurological event, even infectious disease. Meaning, you don't get the flu unless you have a disconnection from the brain to the body first. Does that make sense? Understanding it from a biblical perspective, it sure does. Do you see sin? Until there is a disconnect of the head from the body. You don't see it. So in other words, at Adam and Eve, subluxation got them. Right? Only chiropractic patients got that one. Right? Subluxation is when the bones move out of place. So subluxated existence. Thomas Edison said, "The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, in diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease." Everybody knows who Thomas Edison was, right? Probably the greatest inventor in American history. Well, one of them. So huge, that he said this a long time ago. He foresaw how this was going to occur. In fact, there's even if you look back, he actually designed one of the first scoliosis treatment devices because he understood the importance of the spine. Powerful stuff. Going to the next one here. The World Health Organization, they say that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Yet, when do most people go to the doctor? When they're sick. If I told you guys that all of you should be practicing regular health care, we'd be like, what? I'm not sick. Especially the young ones, right? Especially if you're a high school athlete. It's like, why do I need to go to the doctor? I'm not sick. I'm great. Right? But see, that's because of the way that we've been trained our entire lives to think that we need to address things when we're already sick. Do you wait until your life is broken and fallen apart and miserable to show up on Sunday? That was perfect. Yeah, it's true. It's true, right? So we got to change the way that we got to move from a reactive standpoint to a proactive standpoint. This saves lives. It changes lives. We got to change the way that we walk, the way that we live. Okay, how you were made. So basically in review here, the body is one unit. Think about that the next time that you decide you need to go and get a nose job. Think about that the next time you go to the doctor and they say, oh, we're going to just go ahead and take out your kid's tonsils and adenoids and some other stuff that's in there. Right? We're just going to take that out. We're going to take out a kidney. You got 2 of them. Right? We need to think about the way that wisdom teeth get those pulled. I don't know. You pull it out. You should challenge anything that means taking stuff away from you. Because you're pulling somebody out of the pews. You're changing the design that God made for you. That's important, right? So health only happens when each member is healthy to a cellular level. So brain to body is as God is to church. Powerful, powerful, powerful connection there. This is the big missing component in healthcare today. Does everybody get that section? Okay, let's go on to the next one. This is the fun part. You ready? Ready? There we go. Okay. Would you call this food? Okay, let's look at the selection that we have right here. We have scorpions and some kind of other large, scary beetle. Anybody in here call that food? Okay. The second one is snake barbecue, I think. That snake's on a skewer. The third one over there is you guys probably have dogs like that at home. That's some kind of greyhound or something. Of course, it's barbecued and has a giant hole in it, but same thing. The one over here, these are rats. These are. But don't worry, they're shaved. You don't get hair in your dish. The next one over here, these are some large maggots. Large form of maggots or caterpillars or something. And the last one, everybody remembers that one? Who in here has seen Indiana Jones? Yeah. Monkey brains, right? Okay, so do you guys consider that food?
No.
No. But it's interesting to note, though, that do you understand that there's cultures around the world that call this food?
Yes.
Right. They call this food. This is food to them. So this is a really important point as we're moving forward, because when we're looking at the Bible and we're reading stuff about food, well, we need to understand what the Bible calls food. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay? So, let's go on to the next one here. The Bible's eating plan. Leviticus chapter 11. Food is defined as something that has a split hoof and chews the cud. Basically, eats grass, digests grass. Okay? So it has to have those two things. So if it chews the cud but it doesn't have a split hoof, then it's not food. Make sense? Okay? Next one, fish that have fins and scales. Those two things. It has to have fins and scales. So an eel, just for an example, an eel has fins, but does it have scales?
No.
So it's not food. It doesn't meet that qualification. Anybody that had sushi tonight, right? Number 3, birds minus a list of exclusions. Seemingly, all of the ones that are in the list are known predators and scavengers of that time. Have you guys ever seen vultures eat?
Yes.
Okay, they go out and they literally will destroy a dead carcass that's been laying there for 8 days on the side of the road. Would you gauge that it probably is not safe to eat a vulture? Right, because it's been eating dead flesh. Okay? The next one, insects with jointed legs above the feet, i.e. things like grasshoppers, crickets, and locusts. You can actually eat those things.
Yeah.
If that's on your diet plan, that's perfectly fine. These things are considered safe because of what they consume. Okay, so go to the next one here. So what we have here is we just laid out a category of what is called food. And God calls food things like cow, deer, lamb, goat, chicken, duck, turkey, salmon, tuna, flounder, and locusts if you like. Okay, this is just a selection of them. There's other things on the list. Obviously we can't go through a list of thousands of fish, and say which ones are and which ones aren't. But guess what? That list exists. It's called kosher, right? You guys have probably heard that word before. Okay, but what we see on the other side, we have to put into a different category. That's not God food, that's culture food, right? So for the other cultures, the snakes and the monkey brains, and in some cultures even human flesh, right? Those things are food to them. But that's not what God calls food. You guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is really important as we move forward. So in that culture food, we have pork, rabbit, catfish, lobster, shrimp, crab, oysters, squid, gator, frog legs, and deep fried Coke. You guys know what deep fried Coke is? It's where they take the raw Coca-Cola syrup and they pour it into a deep fat fryer like a funnel cake. And it crystallizes and turns into a big, yeah. That sounds just awesome, doesn't it? Okay, so do you guys get that? That is a massive, massive point that you have to look at before you look at any other scripture about food. This has to be the central theme in your mind when you're reading. So that we're careful not to interject meaning into something for the sake of who? Ourselves, right? For the sake of our wishes and our desires. So go on to the next one here. So whether you eat or drink, the question here is food important to God? So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Is that Old Testament or New Testament? That's New Testament. Number 2, why did God lump the instructions regarding food, sexuality, and idolatrous worship all in together in Leviticus 11 through 21? And why does he again mention unclean food with idolatry in Isaiah 65 through 66? If food is not important, why does he lump it with idolatry? And when you get into this stuff, it's stunning to see why, because basically food and what we eat is wrapped to the core all the way back in existence, back to pagan cultures in idolatrous worship. we could get into the whole story, but that's a whole other half hour of the history behind that. The bottom line is, though, God takes it seriously. He takes it seriously. While this is not a matter of salvation, does everybody get that? I'm not telling you you're gonna burn because you ate shrimp tonight. Does everybody understand that? Okay? This is not a matter of salvation, because we know, I know, you know why Jesus died on the cross. Because we're not always the smartest. Right? So, thank God, salvation is there to cover us. But we are certainly compelled, even expected, to respect these commands. And I want to go so far as to say this. How many people in here are married? Okay. So I'm going to make a slightly shocking addition to you. If you were doing something that you shouldn't do in marriage, and your spouse caught you in the act, and yet you told her straight to her face, well, or his face, well, I'm going to continue to do it anyways, do you expect that that relationship is healthy? Okay, so there's a point, that point ends tonight, just for the record, where we just didn't know. We just didn't know. In other words, we just hadn't been caught. But see, now, you might want to put on the earmuffs, right? Now, you know. And so now, there is an expectation that you are going to change the way that you move forward. It's called repentance, right? You never thought that you were going to sit through a sermon connecting food with repentance, did you? Right? It just happened. That just happened. Okay, go on to the next one. So the other white meat, we're going to talk about pork. If there's any pork farmers, you might want to sit in the back of this one. Consumer Reports, January of 2013, that was just this year, found the following regarding tested pork from grocery store shelves. This is common grocery store. They just walked in, grabbed random packages from major brands. Okay? They found that 1/5 contained low levels of ractopamine, a drug banned in the European Union, China, and Taiwan, used to promote growth in pigs. Okay? It's a drug that makes them rapidly expand in their weight. Why? Because they go to slaughter faster and they have a higher poundage, so they sell for more. It's marketing, right? But this drug is banned for its dangers. Okay? 69%. Who in here loves diarrhea? Gonna get a lot of that tonight, right? 69% was infected with Yersinia enterocolitica. This is a diarrhea causing agent that causes enterocolitis, diverticulitis, polyps, and can even, of course, lead to colonic cancer, right? 69%, that's not a small minority. That's the majority of it. Okay? Salmonella, staph, and listeria, 3 to 7%, and 11% harbored another nasty intestinal bug, Enterococcus. Okay, go on to the next. Pigs eat anything. Literally anything. This is not for the soft of stomach, but they eat feces. There was a study that was done where they stacked hog pens on top of each other, and only fed the one on the top, all of them lived perfectly fine. All of them lived, no problem. They eat feces, they eat urine, they eat maggots. They even will eat the cancerous growths of other pigs and animals. If you happen to be in the mafia, what's a good way to get rid of people? You know, pigs will eat anything. They will eat anything. Pork is known to carry trichinosis and tapeworm. Okay, these are also dangerous things. I mean, the idea of having worms crawling around in your guts, that's appealing on any given day. Pigs don't sweat or perspire, so they harbor toxins. Wait a minute, I think we just found the purpose for pigs. God's purpose for pigs. They're scavengers. They're the cleanup crew. They're the trash men for the planet. Thank God He created pigs because they keep roadkill off the roads. Right? That's what scavengers do. They're there as the filth. Okay, this is according to the Food and Water Watch. All right, the Bloomberg 2012 reported that shrimp plants were full of garbage, flies, and all other kinds of wretched filth. Shrimp tested by Texas Tech found levels of banned antibiotics 29 times higher than FDA limits and another 150 times higher. 150 times higher what the FDA says is safe. And do you think the FDA gives the best recommendation? Hardly, right? That's the most before they see monstrous atrocities at the foot of it. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is currently working with the FDA testing oil and corexit levels in Gulf Coast shrimp. I saw a patient told me this today. I haven't actually had time to research into it, but they said, have you heard about the flesh-eating bacteria? Okay? And I said, well, you know, I've heard about it. She said, well, they started investigating it and looking at the tar balls. And they found that there is an extreme concentration of the flesh-eating bacteria inside the tar balls. What do shrimp do? They clean up. What are they down there cleaning up? The tar balls. They're cleaning up all the sludge that's on the bottom. That's their purpose. That's what they're there for. We need them there to keep our oceans clean. But the Bible doesn't say it's food. Go on to the next one. Genetically modified organisms are created using DNA of viruses, etc., and incorporating them into the food DNA. So this is not hybridization. This is not crossbreeding. This is a completely different being, where they're taking the genes from a fish and inserting into the genes of a vegetable. Okay? So this is a monstrosity. This is an atrocity. Most engineered are to be herbicide tolerant, which means once it's there, we can't kill it. We're starting to now find that because the weeds are starting to have the same resistance to the Monsanto sprays that the Monsanto corn does. So now we can't kill these super weeds, and they're taking over. Okay? So we're creating things that we can't destroy. This is an abomination. Antibiotic resistance genes are used as selectable markers by scientists when trying to incorporate new genes, and as a result may be leading to antibiotic resistance in people. What this means is that when they create a new substance, what they do is they use an antibiotic resistance gene as a marker, so that now they create the organism and they test it by exposing it to an agent. And if it survives, then they know that the antibiotic resistance took into the DNA. Well, if the antibiotic resistance took into the DNA, then they know that the other genetic modification went into the DNA as well. The problem is, it's now antibiotic resistance. So now, the antibiotics don't work. Guess what we see in medicine right now? Antibiotic resistance all over the place. We're creating this stuff. It's an abomination. Okay? God didn't make it this way for reasons we are not smart enough to understand. Fair enough to say? Okay? Go on to the next one. Food scripture is often taken out of context. I know you guys are already having questions, but, you know, I thought we could eat this. I thought we could eat that. Here's where we cover every single one of the big scriptures that are often used to this meal list. But the Spirit explicitly says that in later times, some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons, by means of hypocrisy of liars, seared in their own conscience as with a branding iron. Men who forbid marriage and advocate abstaining from foods which God has created to be gratefully shared in by those who believe and know the truth. This is 1 Timothy, New Testament. So we read that, and it's like, you know, see right there. That's, you know, you don't listen to people who are deceitful and tell you to stay away and abstain from foods. That's ridiculous. Okay, well, there's a couple of things here. Number one, if you consider what God said, doctrine of demons, remember, God is the one that said what was food and what wasn't food. Is what He said, doctrine of demons. So obviously they're talking about something different here. A second point is, Abstaining from foods. Wait, go back. Sorry. Okay, so it says abstaining from foods. What are foods? It's what God says is food. It's not what we say is food. Right? So we've got to change the way that we read it, not the way that it is written. Okay? Do you guys all see that one? Okay? So this actually comes down to, if you go on to the next one, it's not on here, but basically here's the point. That one is talking about, basically there was a sect at that time that was telling people that they needed to be vegetarian. So it was saying that God made meats clean, these certain meats clean to eat. You can eat them. You don't have to abstain from eating meats. It was about vegetarianism. Okay? Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. This is Genesis 9:3. Okay? Now, I have given every green herb for food, and it was so. Genesis 1:30. So we read this, and we're like, wait a minute. So he gave us every green herb for food. Would anybody in here think to eat poison ivy? Or poison sumac? Or, there's a lot of plants that we know that we cannot eat. So see, what you come to realize is that what he says is there's something more to it. There's something that is not written here. And basically, I'm gonna present it this way, that he was saying all the things that you already know I've called out food, because do you think that Adam and Noah and Moses and all these guys knew what food was and what wasn't? I mean, Adam walked around with God for a good while. Don't you think he knew what he was supposed to do and wasn't supposed to do before he did it? If you don't think that's the truth, then you got to challenge whose fault is it that they ate from the tree of life? Because, I mean, if he didn't know, then, if he didn't know what he was supposed to do and what he wasn't supposed to do, then maybe it wasn't his fault. Maybe it was God's fault. Right? So so we've got to look at this and we got to say, okay, well, there's obviously we can't eat everything. So what this is saying is all the things that I gave you for food, all these things, everything that is called for food, these are the things that you're going to eat. And so we look at the way that lines up with this other one, which is in the same book of the Bible. It's written in the same style. Everything that lives and moves will be food for you. Well, obviously that's a direct contradiction to what we see later. Does God contradict himself? He doesn't contradict himself. So he's not saying that, well, because a snake slithers on the ground that you can eat it. He's referencing the things that he's going to later describe, because in Leviticus, is it important that God now lays out everything? Absolutely. It's a different time. In Genesis, this is a different time. It's a different story. In Leviticus, now he's laying out, okay, we're going to lay this stuff out. You guys are going to know, as my nation, I just took you out of the wilderness, out of slavery, out of bondage. Now I'm going to show you what to do, and I'm going to write it down. This is what you do. Bam, 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 bam. You see that? Very different story between these two books. So everything is the things that they already knew. This was like common sense. Okay? And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten. See, this is in Genesis. This is Genesis 6:21. So all food that is eaten. So obviously these are, again, this is just more confirmation that this is the train of thought here, that these are the things that they already knew they should be eating. And it didn't require additional clarification. Does that make sense? Okay. And gather it to thee, and it shall be food for thee and for them. Okay, go on to the next one. Next one. Do not tear down the work of God for the sake of food. All things indeed are clean, but they are evil for the man who eats and gives offense. Oh, it's tough, right? All things indeed are clean. Are dead bodies clean? Can we eat those? What about human bodies? Can we eat those? Nope, obviously not. So there's more to this. This is about going vegan. One person has faith that he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats vegetables only. That's 2 verses later. See why it's so important to read in context? You can't read things just out of context, 1 verse at a time. You got to look at the whole thing. This is about being vegetarian. Once again, food is considered clean meats to a Jew, right? Clean meat is food. Unclean meats are not food. Okay? Go to the next one. Why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat bread. Matthew 15:2. What goes into a man's mouth does not make him unclean, but what comes out of his mouth, that is what makes him unclean. Matthew 15:11. Okay? So this verse is used to say, see, what I put in my mouth, that can't make me clean or unclean. You know, I can eat what I want to because it doesn't make me unclean. See, it says it right here in Matthew 15:11. But if you just go back a few to verse 2, it's talking about hand washing. There's no context in food here. They're not talking about food. They're talking about the act that was known to all of them, that they should wash their hands a certain way and a certain number of times, but as a ritual purification before they eat. Yet they weren't sitting down washing their hands getting ready to eat a pork sandwich. They were sitting down to eat what they considered clean food at that time. This is about hand washing. You see that? Go on to the next one. Okay, so Mark 7:19, because it does not go into his heart, but into his stomach and is eliminated. Thus he declared all foods clean. Okay, all foods. Again, what is food? Food is what God called food. He's not saying that pork and shrimp are clean foods. Point 1, foods therefore only the things that God considered food, not man. Point 2, again, this isn't about food. This one is about hand washing. And if you go to verse 7:2, which is 17 verses before this verse, it says, and had seen that some of his disciples were eating their bread with impure hands. So it's not talking about, again, this is out of context, it's about hand washing. Okay, Acts 11:5-7. This is the one that you guys are probably most familiar with. An object coming down like a great sheet lowered by the four corners of the sky, and it came right down to me. And when I had fixed my gaze on it, and I was observing it, I saw the four-footed animals of the earth, and the wild beasts, and the crawling creatures, and the birds of the air. I also heard a voice saying to me, get up, Peter, kill and eat. So there it is. God told Peter to get up and eat. Right? So eat away. We can have whatever we want. Right? Okay. This is where it gets interesting. Next one. But I said, oh no. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. By no means, Lord, for nothing unholy or unclean has ever entered my mouth. Did he just argue with God? Don't you know you just shouldn't do that, right? He just argued with God. But a voice from heaven answered a second time. What God has cleansed, no longer consider unholy. This happened 3 times. 3 times. Are you telling me he argued with God 3 times? Why do you argue with God 3 times? I'll tell you why. Because you can't believe what you're hearing. Right? That's why you argue with God, because what you're hearing doesn't line up with what you know as truth. And so he wakes up, and the long story goes like this. You know, this happened 3 times, and everything was drawn back up to the sky. That was Acts 11:8-10. But then in verse 18, he goes on. After he sits there and ponders and beats himself over the head trying to figure out what's going on, all of a sudden something miraculous happens, and he says, well then, God has granted to the Gentiles also the repentance that leads to life. Got it. Right? So it took giving him something that he could not understand, that he could not wrap his head around. God just told me to eat unclean foods. He just told me to go completely against what I've learned and what I've practiced my entire life. And then in one instance, he figures it out just like that. And realized, oh, it wasn't about food. Got it. Pretty cool, right? Okay. This was a vision not of food, but of Gentile inclusion into the kingdom of heaven. Awesome stuff. Next one. How did Jesus eat? Is this our idea of Jesus? You get what is it from the movie Buddy Jesus? The guy you drink beer with and eat cheeseburgers? Right? How did Jesus eat? I'll tell you how he ate. Like a Jewish rabbi. Because what was Jesus? A Jewish rabbi. and here's another bigger thought. If he had not have eaten like a Jewish rabbi, why would we be sitting here right now? Because if he did not eat that way, what would that have been considered? A sin. If Jesus sinned, would he qualify as yours and my Messiah? So if we are to emulate Jesus, that means we walk like Jesus, we eat like Jesus, we talk like Jesus, we conduct our marriages like Jesus, we do it all. We don't pick and choose what we do. Right? Next one. I love this one. God does care how you take care of yourself. Your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God. The only thing that He gave you is your body. You are the temple. You are the temple. You are the temple. Think about that for a second. You are the temple. Not you are the temple. You are the temple. All of you. Not just this thought process that happens inside of your skull. Your entire existence is the temple. Don't doubt that for a second. Consider here another reason why kosher still applies in its connection to idolatry. God only allowed certain animals to be sacrificed in His temple. Whoa! Whoa! Isn't that cool? I love this picture. I don't always clear the temple, but when I do, I make my own whip. All right. Next one. These are two more of my favorite verses. Okay, worship. Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Read that again. Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices. What that means is everything that you do with this body is a sacrifice to God. When you don't want to get up off the couch and go and exercise, you are refusing to offer yourself as a living sacrifice. Ouch. This stuff hurts, don't it?
Yeah.
When you really get it, it hurts. It's conviction. It should be. When you eat things that you are not supposed to eat, you are dismantling the temple. You are defiling the temple. And Jesus is going to take a whip to you. It's called disease. It's called degeneration. Now, we go on from that one. That one's in Romans 12:1. But this is so cool. Exodus 23:25. Worship the Lord your God, and His blessing will be on your food and water. I will take away sickness from among you. It's right in there that if you live the way that you're supposed to live, God will literally keep sickness and disease from you that you see happening all around you all the time. And what happens when you see people living a life where they take care of themselves? Disease bounces off. People beat cancer. Do you escape death? No. Unfortunately. But at the end of the day, the point is this. Can you live a richer, stronger, healthier life where you can accomplish more? Absolutely. That's worth it. That's worth it. Put the Twinkies down. It's worth it. Insights into disease. Disease also visually connected to the spine. A tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, as does the nerve system, but envy makes the bones rot. When the bones rot in science, your nerve system rots. You develop disease. Direct correlation. That's Proverbs 14:30. And make paths straight for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. Hebrews 12:13. Anybody ever have a low back out or a hip out? Think about that again. Make straight paths for your feet. Keep that frame in position so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed above, down, inside out, the way that God built you. That is so cool. Notice off to the side, stiff-necked. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. Who said this? This was Jesus' famous forsaken quotation before that. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. I am disconnected. I am subluxated in this moment from my Father. And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. I was kidding. That is the chiropractic verse. Exodus 32:9. Hear, O Israel, my son, forget not my law or teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. How many of them? All of them. For length of days and years of life, worth living, and tranquility, inward and outward, and continuing through old age till death, these shall they add to you. Let not mercy and kindness, shutting out all hatred and selfishness, and truth, shutting out all deliberate hypocrisy or falsehood, forsake you. Bind them about your neck, write them upon the tablet of your heart. So shall you find favor, good understanding, and high esteem in the sight or judgment of God and man. Lean on, trust in, and be confident in the Lord with all your heart and mind, and do not rely on your own insight and understanding. Go directly to the text. In all your ways know, recognize, and acknowledge Him, and He will direct and make paths straight and plain your paths, way of living. Be not wise in your own eyes. Reverently fear and worship the Lord, and turn entirely away from evil. It shall be health to your nerves and sinews, and marrow and most moistening to your bones. Proverbs 3. Isn't that awesome? So where is our faith turned? Last couple of notes here. For by thy pharmakia were all nations deceived. Revelation 18:23. That word pharmakia, if you look it up, if you look in your Bibles right now, Revelation 18:23, you're going to find the word sorcery. That word is pharmakia in the Greek, in the original. Pharmakia, according to the Thayer's lexicon, is the use or administering of drugs or poisoning, though it is translated as sorcery in many versions of Scripture. Interesting, huh? Rather than turning, here's a point, rather than turning to above, down, inside out, the way that our bodies are built, we turn to the holy grail of modern medicine when our lifestyle has not served us well. So we're saved, here's the point, we're saved by grace, not pills. We're saved by grace, not pills. God needs no help, just no interference. It is most necessary to know the nature of the spine. One or more vertebrae may or may not go out of place very much, and if they do, they are likely to produce serious complications and even death, if not properly adjusted. Many diseases are related to the spine. Who was this? This was Hippocrates, known as the father of modern medicine. So, last couple of notes here. Really, the last couple of notes. The Feast of First Fruits is a beautiful picture offering the best of the harvest back to God, preceded by a very careful selection. So, if you guys aren't familiar with this, I really encourage you to look at this. Maybe do a thing about it next year. The Feast of First Fruits is one of God's feast days, one of the holy days. And what it represents is that basically the people in Israel, they would go out in the fields and they would, like in the movies, you know, they walk through the fields and they feel all the heads of the grain and they look for the best parts of the grain. They look for the best, the tallest, the healthiest ones that are out there. and they find the best section. Then they talk to Joe and Pete and John, and all the other guys, and they inspect each other's section to see of all those ones, which one is really the best of the best. Which is the most perfect on that entire field. That is known as the first fruits. So when they find that section, what do? Sit down and worship it? No. They gather it up and they cut it down. They cut it at its base. They destroy it. They take it down. They destroy it. They pull it out from the rest. But then something interesting happens. They take that bundle and they start waving it up to heaven. They start putting it up to heaven as an offering of the first fruits back to God. What was Jesus? He was the first fruits. He was found to be perfect. He was examined over and over and over again. Then when they found him to be perfect and without flaw, they cut him down so that he could then be offered as the first fruits, so that now the rest of us can go into the field and eat of the harvest. Wow. Isn't that cool? I love that. Jesus was the first fruit because he was found to be pure to God's creation without defect. This is harsh. GMOs are mankind's attempt to better God's design by making it bigger, sweeter, faster, more resistant, etc., by incorporating other things into its very DNA. We try to make better than, in this representation, make better than what God could create, make better than Jesus, right? When we incorporate anything into our faith that is not written as it is written, while it may look these things on the surface, sweeter, better, easier, right? More productive for our lives, better for our families. While it looks like these things on the surface, it is most destructive and unpredictable at its core. We can't do better than as it is written. That's the point. So, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. We all know this verse. Guys, that's what God has for us. We got to start looking at the Bible for what it is. It's an instruction manual. It is the owner's manual for how you are to conduct this amazing thing that God gifted to you and you alone. Thank you.
So, Dr. Mike, how does all this, you're a chiropractor though. I mean, so how does all this?
I'm a doctor. Doctor means teacher.
But how do I, okay, you taught us about eating more than about chiropractic, right?
Yeah. Well, not really. The whole first section is on what you do. What you do, how your body is built. So basically the first connection is now you guys know how you're built, right? So now it means you've got to decide, well, how should I take care of this thing? If I know how it's built, how should I take care of this thing? If you're taking 4 different medications, and that's your means of taking care of this thing, you should probably start challenging that idea. Make sense? So now you have to go back to the root and say, well, how am I built? And I'm built above, down, and inside out. I should probably foster that a little bit, right? So that's those dots are to be connected on an individual level. But yeah, certainly there's easy things that you can do that make a world of difference more than what you're doing right now. Absolutely, absolutely.
I've been going to Dr. Mike since, I guess, September, and one, like you said, easy thing, he told me to stop consuming dairy products, and since I've been doing that, even though I love gelato and I love cheese, so I stopped consuming those things, and I've been feeling so much better. I mean, it's just been amazing what he said, and the medication I was taking, probably I think 3, and one of them we kind of researched online, and it's called methotrexate, and it's a drug that they give to cancer patients as well. And it also is used to induce abortions. And I haven't taken that in probably like 2 months. Well, since I've been going there, I haven't taken it anymore. So I haven't taken anything anymore.
Well, I was diagnosed with sleep apnea, and they gave me this machine, and I've had it a long time. And I don't use it because it made me have it made me have allergy type symptoms, so I don't use it. But my wife, you know, you don't know what you're doing when you sleep, but people that look at you. So I have bad sleep pattern, and so sometimes my wife couldn't even sleep with me because I'd snore so loud. And so since I've been going to Dr. Mike, I haven't had any problem sleeping, and I don't snore anymore. But another thing to do, this weekend, I know it was prayer, but I started developing cold symptoms really bad. And I mean, it was really bad. My nose was just water. And in 3 days, I was healed. Now, I know the saints are praying for me, but I'm thinking that, you know, with your adjusting, my body was able to then properly, through nerves or something, heal itself.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother teaching on itself. Guys, that's kind of what I wanted to point out, and that's really the whole point in between the Atman and the Neshama, how you're built. You can't separate spiritualism from physical. You can't do it. They're inseparable. You would cease to exist if you separate. So when you consider that, in our time right here, all of that stuff, to me, it makes perfect sense scientifically, because it's the combination of how the things that you think manifest physically. That's why prayer works. But it's not a mystical thing. It's what we refer to as an ordinary miracle.
So tell them what you told me about why I had the sleep apnea thing. And you remember when my head was too heavy?
That's a part of it, right? No, it's basically what happens is your brainstem is right at the base of your skull here, right? It sits inside of your spine. And the brainstem controls heart rate, rhythm, and respiration. What happens while you sleep? Heart rate, rhythm, and respiration. Those are the main vital functions that just are supposed to operate normally. But see, in his case, his Alice, his uppermost bone, was completely shifted, rocked, bent, twisted. You know, I mean, it was doing crazy things up there. So it was putting pressure directly on the brainstem. So when he goes down to sleep and he can't regulate what's happening, he's reliant 100% on those vital functions. Those vital functions were not operating properly. So he was having sleep apnea and snoring. You see the same connection in babies who have been pulled out of the womb. You guys have heard of sudden infant death syndrome, okay? We're being told that it's because of ceiling fans and sleeping on your left, no, sleeping on your right, wait, no, sleeping on your belly, wait, no, it's sleeping on your back, right? You know, we're told all these things that it's all over the place. No, we have the research to show that it's caused by birth trauma to the upper cervical spine. When you damage, because they're pulling on average 130 pounds of force to pull a baby from the womb, that's a baby with a full-grown teenager hanging from their legs, right? 130 pounds of force to pull the baby out. It damages, over 85% of babies are damaged at birth. And we think we don't need chiropractors. So he was basically in that category.
Okay, why does a child, why do you have children that come to your clinic?
Because we don't treat disease. Right? That's the short. You guys get that? We don't treat disease. What do? We prevent. We keep you well. We keep you functioning at your God-given potential. Do you want your children living at their God-given potential? I sure do. So my kids have been adjusted since the day they were born. I delivered my kids, and they were adjusted immediately.
What? You mean when,
They were still greasy when they got their first adjustment.
as a little,
Yeah.
like, pat on the rear end? Ah.
No. That's only in the movies. No. No, an adjustment on a baby is, it looks like such a mundane thing, you don't even know anything's happening.
I know what you
I mean,
do
it's
with
literally
me.
just-
You like,
Yeah,
but you didn't do that to the.
that's because you're stiff-necked.
I probably am because he hooks this thing to my neck and pull it. I guess I'm stiff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
No.
not the stiff neck Bible school.
Yeah.
Wow.
Babies are completely different, and they're really easy to adjust. But I mean, that's it. It's just most of the disease and dysfunctions that we sitting right here are dealing with right now, our kids don't have to have. We just got to change the way that we think. We got to change the way that we act, and we've got to act for them differently because they can't act for themselves. Right?
Would that include immunization?
Yeah, absolutely, most definitely. Let me reiterate, what do you mean by that?
We will be forced to give our children immunization.
Yeah, my kids are not immunized. And it's not, and just for the record, it's not immunizations, it's vaccinations. Because immunizations imply that they make you immune, which they don't. Yeah. So, no, my kids have never been vaccinated, they've never taken a drug, they've never had a shot, they've never taken an antibiotic. They've done nothing but taken vitamins and get adjusted, and they're perfectly fine. On the other hand, I will say this though, only a few of you in here know this because you don't know me, but don't think that I'm on some other cliff, like hanging off on some totally different lifestyle. My second child, we lost at 3 weeks old to a heart defect. So trust me, I know where medicine comes in, and but I have the intelligence and the vigor to research to know the difference between where the different systems come into play. But I have absolute respect for the body, the way that it works.
Okay, Dr. Mike, you've given us a lot here. Where do we go from here?
What I would say, the first thing is fill out the surveys, and give those to my staff. Because if you guys, what we're going to do, we talked about it today, and on Monday, anybody that wants to come in and basically come into the office, check things out, you like what you heard tonight, and you want to look in further, you can come in and get a tour of the office and get an insight nerve scan at no charge. And then from there, if you decide you want to do something, you can. If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine. Either way you guys want to do it. But we're setting aside Monday for anybody that wants to come in. So make sure that your surveys get turned in. And that is also going to be the means to get you the slides from tonight.
Okay. Is that good?
I think so. What I'll do is I'll hang out for any last minute questions. If anybody wants to ask anything, public or private, you can hang out and we'll talk about it afterwards.
Yes, even babies. Well, we're going to thank Dr. Mike Bucknell